Hello, college football fans. Welcome back to another take of Urban's Take with yours truly, Tim May. But Urban Meyer, welcome back into the fire pit here my man.
Yeah, it's been an interesting couple of weeks so far. So great to be with you, Tim.
Yeah, I think some people are picking up on this show, but let's get right to it, man. Speaking of fire pit, you're going right into it, man. Austin, Texas, in an early September football game. The game's going to be kicking off at 11 a.m. there. Big noon kickoff's going to be there. You know, you and your crew. Just what are you looking forward to in this one besides wearing something that you can stay cool in?
Well, you're not going to stay cool.
No.
This is two blue bloods. This is two traditional powerhouses. I've been watching Texas. They're not there yet. You know, the coach is doing a good job. Sarkisian, he hit the transfer portal hard. But I watched last week's film. Quinn Ewers, I believe, is going to be a fine quarterback. But tall task for them right now against Alabama. Alabama, man, it's a little bit like Ohio State. You know, they just every year they just keep coming. I don't think Alabama has the skill. You know, I was watching to do a little breakdown for Big Noon. That 2020 team with that Waddle and Devontae, the receiver. I'm not sure I've ever. I know Ohio State has great receivers. That was incredible. They don't have that. But what they do is have everything else. That quarterback's phenomenal. Great defense, probably the best defense player in college football. So a tall task for the Texas Longhorns, but we can't wait to be there.
Hey, real quick, Will Anderson. You know, when people call him great, call him a Heisman Trophy possible candidate. Well, I guess every player is at this point. You know, if it's truly fair. But what from a coach's standpoint? What just jumps off the film at you immediately about Will Anderson? You know, I mean, what makes him such a threat?
Well, first of all, he's extremely talented. He's not that big, 235 pounds,
Right.
200 pounds, but what he is an energizer bunny. He doesn't stop. You know, I think Nick Bosa was like that to a degree, and we've had some players that's just relentless to the ball, and he makes them, you know, backdoors them. He makes them across the field. And I've read this about him. He's the alpha on the field. He's the leader on the field, which kind of fires me up because I love talented people, but I love talented players with leadership even more. They say this guy's got all that. So yes, he's talented, but his number one quality, he is relentless. He just doesn't stop, and he has one speed.
You know, it's funny you use that alpha dog. Well, you said alpha dog is what Larry Johnson, you know, your former defensive line coach at Ohio State uses, and he was looking for an alpha dog to step forward last week against Notre Dame, and he thought he had some really good players going into this game. Felt really good about this group of 12 that he's playing. Mike Hall seemed to answer that bell. Just does he look like an alpha dog to you? Obviously, as Ryan Dace told us this week, he's got to do it again now. He's got to keep doing it. But Mike Hall, 51, man, he got after it.
Yeah, they got a couple of really good ones. JT and then Sawyer. They moved him really interesting. They moved him all over the place.
Yeah.
You know, he was playing in a 2-point quite a bit, but you know, all the great bright spots, which I think, you know, I started hearing complaints and people, well, what about this? Well, you guys stop for a minute. And that was Notre Dame, the top 5 opponent. Every player on that team is highly recruited. Ohio State needed that. Ohio State needed you know, a street fight, a fist fight, an opportunity. You have to go run the ball to go win the game because I got news, Tim. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you have to stop someone, and they did. You know, that was I think 72 yards after halftime or 72 yards in the final 3 quarters, something ridiculous against a talented team. So how good's Notre Dame? We don't know yet. I think we got a pretty good idea how good Ohio State is.
Yeah.
They can run the ball and they play good defense.
Yeah, and then finally, when they needed some passes, I mean, C.J. Stroud working with a group, they're a new group for the most part. I mean, you know, everybody thinks you pick off, you know, and you know this better than anybody. College football teams rarely ever pick up where they left off, you know, the year before, because so many, just you can have 3 or 4 personnel changes which make a huge difference. But I wanted to ask you about that, Urban, just in that Ohio State Notre Dame game. Jackson Smith-Njigba got banged up during the game. He's got a hamstring situation he's dealing with. We'll see how quickly he comes back. Basically considered maybe the elite receiver in the country, but definitely in the conversation. Julian Fleming wasn't able to answer the bell for the game. Next thing you know, at one of the most critical moments in this season so far for Ohio State, here's Xavier Johnson, former walk-on, a guy that walked on when you were there as a defensive back in 2018. He's at that slot receiver. He picks up on the two safeties blitzing, leaving basically zero cover on the backside, along with C.J. Stroud, and there's former walk-on catches a 24-yard touchdown pass. It puts Ohio State ahead in that game, and they go on to win the game. This is late in the third quarter. Just talk about those checkmate moments that come in games, man, where you got guys just have to make a play one way or the other, offensively or defensively. But that was one where no one had Xavier Johnson being a hero of that game going into it, but he stepped up and was the moment was not too big for him, right?
Yeah, real quick about Xavier, then I do want to talk about the checkmate moments. I think the viewer would be very intrigued by that. But Xavier was a walk-on. We immediately saw talent, and we had issues at corner, so we played him at corner. We had issues at safety, we moved him to safety. Then we moved him to wideout. He's real intelligent, really talented player, selfless as can be. We played him on special teams, and I knew, Ryan Day knew, the staff knew that we somehow have to find a place for that. So I was like you watching that game, and here we go. We're in that checkmate moment where they're starting to drive the ball against Notre Dame. Notre Dame makes a decision. They go for the checkmate, because they felt that Ohio State was moving the ball. They had to do something drastically to change it. And they went with safety blitz, and they blitzed them from depth, which I'm sure that wasn't exactly timed up because they didn't get there.
Yeah.
But what was really intriguing by C.J. Stroud, if you really watch that, he understood. And Corey Dennis and Ryan Day have told me this. C.J. sees the field better than any quarterback they've ever had. Yeah. And that's a pretty strong statement. He saw the zero blitz instead of panicking, because the guy was going to be free. You saw one of the players come free. And Xavier had to recognize it. It went to zero coverage, no safety help. And instead of CJ panicking and throwing the ball away, he hung in there because they were coming from depth and released the ball. Yeah. So perfect execution by a second or third string wide receiver, a quarterback working with them. That's, first of all, it's great coaching, but it's also just excellent job by the wideouts.
Yeah. Where else did you see some checkmate moments that that boy, those moments that grind a coach's guts, right? I mean, either before or after.
Yeah, you watch the game differently. People ask me when I watch a game, and for 38 years I was knee deep in it, and I still knee deep, but from a different perspective. And so there are about four of them. I have it written down here. And so the first one was the Florida versus Utah, and let's just for the fans. So Utah's going in. They're on about the 8-yard line, I believe. They're deep in the red zone. There's not but a minute and some change left. They're down by 3. Kick the field goal and go play in overtime. It's not that easy. You have a veteran quarterback named Cam Rising that coaches really trust. Yeah. You're playing Florida. That quarterback, Richardson's a monster. He got better as the game went along. But you also just traveled your team, 3 time zones away from Utah to Florida. It's 100 degrees heat. It's humidity. Your players are about done. You don't have the depth of Florida. And so I know I didn't talk to Coach Whittingham, but I know exactly what he's thinking. If we can end this thing, end it now. And they have a good quarterback. They called a pass play. It was poor execution of a pass. But the checkmate moment for when a fan says, why didn't you just kick a field goal? Because if they kick a field goal, go overtime, they probably lose that game. Yeah. Just the sheer wear and tear on the team after that long of playing. That heat, that humidity, and the fact that Florida has more depth, you're going to lose. Plus, they had a talented quarterback, and they had Florida on the heels of it. That was number one. Number two, this is a big one. LSU against Florida State. LSU, that was one of the craziest endings I've ever seen. Oh, yeah. They had the field goal protection was not good. On the left side, early in the game, they got blocked from the left side. They're struggling. They had 2 turnovers on special teams. They drove it 99 yards. The defense is shot for Florida State, exhausted. And they go and score with no time left. A lot of people said, why didn't Brian Kelly and the LSU coaching staff go for 2 and end it right there? That's a good question. I don't know exactly what he was thinking, but the reason you would go for 2 is what I just mentioned. Let's talk real quick. Go 2, there's 2 mandates. If you're on the road and you're the underdog, go for 2. If you're home and the favored, always kick the extra point. An extra point is 98%. You make it. Go for 2 is only 44% time. That's a national average. that if people are wondering why. However, there's a couple X factors. X factor is Florida State was blown out. They just played 100 plays of football, and the offense had the advantage there. So, and they're struggling on special teams. So that would have been one of the reasons why LSU could have went for 2.
Yeah.
And then the final one that was right in front of our eyes. Why in the world did Notre Dame blitz 0? Why did they go 0 blitz against a veteran quarterback? Maybe they knew they had some receiver issues. They look out there and see someone's never really played much. They knew Ojigbo's out of the game. They needed a draft. That was a checkmate moment. So coaches, it's amazing, Tim, during the course of the game. Every play matters. Yeah. But we're going to do this every week, is there's a couple times during a game, and I used to have it written down on my pad of paper or my manila folder I carried with me. These are the checkmate plays, the 4th downs, the onside kick, the fake punt, which I like to do, the trick play like we did against Alabama, the 4th down, the couple 4th downs we did against the team up north.
Yeah.
Those are all those under the checkmate moments that these are my best plays. If I need them, I'm going to use them.
What's funny about that is because, there were quite a few times when we would ask you guys, former head coach, you being a former head coach, this play, whatever, and y'all would always tell us, well, it wasn't just that one play, it was all these, you know what I mean? But I knew you were thinking the exact same thing I was thinking. There are those moments that decide win or lose, you know what I mean? And without a doubt. Hey, I want to get into this with you, man. Clemson actually, I don't think the opening game, and I definitely don't think the first half of an opening game is a referendum on hardly anything. And obviously, Uiagalelei had a tough start the other night for Clemson, yet he came on as that game went on. I mean, you watched it too, but now there's this big debate on whether it ought to be that young man or the Cade Klubnik. People can't wait for that backup quarterback to get his shots, that young star to get his shot and stuff. But, just what's your take on it when you have a situation like that where you have an older guy who hasn't quite gotten that brass ring yet and this young guy who you definitely, it's like you get a brand new car. You definitely want to take him out and test drive him, I mean, that's just the way it is. How do you handle that as a head coach and not let it divide your locker room?
Yeah, I think dividing locker room. You hear that? I don't know the culture. It must be pretty good at Clemson. They've been so long. But to me, that's fan speak, or that's dividing the locker room. I don't see that as an issue. The team up north has 2 quarterbacks. I hear people say if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have 1 quarterback. I don't agree with that at all. That means that you got a really capable backup. The difference that you're dealing with nowadays that I didn't really deal with is the transfer portal. People leaving, people, if you're not starting, have gone. So you have to kind of massage that situation. I never really got caught in that. We have the famous one with J.T. Barrett and Cardell Jones. Cardell Jones puts on a show for the best 3 games, maybe best 3-game run maybe in college football history by a 3rd-string quarterback. Yeah. And he comes back and he deserved the shot. He didn't play great. What's interesting, Cardell's never lost a game as a starter.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, isn't it?
And then we made a change because JT was just playing a little bit better, and that was difficult. I had another time I had Chris Leak and Tim Tebow. Chris Leak was the old veteran quarterback, and I bring in this young gun, Tim Tebow, and the fans loved him, and there was a lot of pressure for me to start Tim. But, I just did what I thought was best. So when you hear like Clemson situation, I think it's fantastic for Dabo Swinney. He got 2 great quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And so that, you don't want a quarterback looking over his shoulder, but you want a quarterback looking over his shoulder. I used to tell people that's life in the big city. I don't want to look over my shoulder. What the hell you think you're talking about? That, of course you are. You got to perform just like the right guard, just like the tailback, just like the defensive end. If you have great players behind you, you got to play well. And so I think Clemson, I watched the game. It didn't look very good for the first half, but the second half, they kind of blew them out. That next quarterback came in. I did see the energy. I did see talent. We're going to see what happens there, but I would not go on the worry about the locker room piece right now. I just think you got 2 really talented quarterbacks.
Yeah. And like you were just talking about, as you call it, the team up north. I mean, Jim Harbaugh started Cade McNamara last week, and I think the plan is to start J.J. McCarthy this week because he really thinks both those guys deserve the shot, but every team assumes an identity at some point. I mean, Cade McNamara led those guys to a Big Ten championship last year. Some sprinkled in from J.J. McCarthy. without a doubt. But you know, I don't know. What do you think about that aspect of it? A guy who thinks he has earned the right to be the guy. We were talking to him at the Big Ten media days before, back in July in Indianapolis, and he felt like he was the quarterback, Cade McNamara. But as a coach, you feel like this other guy may bring something that maybe sets him apart, right?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Our big noon kickoff, they did a bunch of team up mark games last year.
Yeah.
And they feel that J.J. is a more talented guy, higher recruited. But then you start thinking, wait a minute, the guy took him to the first Big Ten championship, first win over Ohio State in 10 years or whatever it was.
Yeah.
How can you do that to him? A coach's responsibility is to play whoever can help you win a game. Now, that's so much easier said than done, especially if there's loyalty. The fact that this guy's a great leader. So, that's going to be interesting to see what plays out. But once again, I always look at that as a positive. If you have two great quarterbacks, play them both. Play them both, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to watch that close, like everyone else. Because how do Cade McNamara to me is a starting quarterback until he is beaten out.
Yeah,
and you better beat him out then.
Yeah. Well, hey, real quick, let's touch on a couple things before we get out of here. Kentucky and Florida this week. I mean, early showdown game, that's always a great game one way or the other, right? I mean, there's a lot of bad blood. I don't know if bad blood's the right way, but there's a lot of friction when those two guys meet. What's just your take on that game? I mean, Florida pulling out that victory with Richardson and stuff last week. I mean, it has to be propelled, feeling pretty good about itself with Billy Napier. But what's just your take on that game?
Yeah, Dan Mullen was obviously a great friend of mine and worked for me for many years. We talked about Richardson, a great quarterback, 15 for Florida. He says he's legitimately a 4'3" guy that's 240 pounds, can throw the ball 85 yards. Most talented player. And he coached Cam Newton.
Yeah.
He says he's bigger, faster. And I'm like, than Cam Newton. And he said, yes. And I saw it. That 50-yard run was magical.
Yes.
They got new staff, new energy down there. I think that Florida's going to have a great run. One thing about Kentucky, when I was there, it was like a 30-game win streak. And I was so nervous. I didn't want to be the coach and lose that game and lose that win streak. That's been broken. The coach Stoops at Kentucky's done a heck of a job. But I think Florida's, to do what they did, the way they did it, I don't want to say they're real and they're back, but this is going to be a good team as they continue to go.
Yeah, there's nothing like there's nothing like winning, and especially winning a big time game that can imbue this ridiculous confidence in a team that maybe it didn't have. It even had questions about itself maybe going into the game and stuff, and can get it done. But man, Will Levis versus Richardson, that's you'd pay money to watch that game, wouldn't you? I mean, the kid from Kentucky, the quarterback Penn State didn't kind of want. Well, I think they wanted him, but didn't want him immediately. Crazy.
You said winning does everything. Winning, the most important thing winning does, and
right.
I say it every game, is 1-0 gives you a chance to go 2-0.
Yeah.
The best thing about 1-0 is a chance to go 2-0. But the most important days of the week are Tuesday, Wednesday. And winning makes Tuesday, Wednesday bearable. Losing makes Tuesday, Wednesday almost unbearable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's awful to go out to work after a loss.
By the way, I call this the Johnny Majors Memorial Game, Tennessee at Pittsburgh. Johnny Majors, coach of Tennessee, coach of Pittsburgh, blah, 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 way back when. But Tennessee going to Pittsburgh, man, is Tennessee a true Southeastern Conference team going above the Mason-Dixon line, to play a game? What's just your early take on that one?
Tennessee has been an enigma the last decade. I mean, you talk about, there was a time when in 05, I first went to Florida. Phil Fulmer, they just won a national championship a few years earlier. 110,000 seat stadium. I mean, intimidating fan base, and it just kind of disappeared for a while. This new coach has kind of brought them back. There's energy. This is going to be a test, because I think Narduzzi, the coach at Pitt, we all have great respect for him for his days at Michigan State. They just won the backyard brawl in the street fight. So you're going to find out about both teams. That's the beautiful thing about playing these games. Some teams you don't know a thing about because they haven't played anybody. Alabama and Texas, who knows how good they are going to be. We're going to find out here in a few days. But you have a good idea about Pitt right now. Pitt's, I think, for real. Tennessee, no idea.
Yeah. Hey, last thing I wanted to ask you, Urban. Obviously, you coached in the Swamp for many years. when it's hot and you're ahead, I mean, the players have got all these little fans going, and they probably have air conditioned benches now, and all kinds of stuff they can sit on in between series and things like that. You got to be standing out there out front, probably I don't know if you wore a hat back then, or, I got to figure Nick Saban's going to be wearing that hat he wears occasionally on set. But how do you just keep your cool in the heat in a situation like they're going to be in at DKR Memorial Stadium on Saturday?
Yeah, you don't. It's going to be. Coaches don't even really think about that, but I would always look at our players, and I would always challenge our staff and our training staff to just to the point it's uncomfortable as far as hydration. First, you're worried about their health and safety, but you can't function. And then also you would really watch the rotation of your players. That's where the Alabamas, Ohio States. When Larry Johnson's got 12 guys,
yeah.
And in my opinion, a defense lineman shouldn't play more than 30 plays. You can play 30 plays in a lot of heat. You can't play 70.
Yeah.
You can play 75, 80. And that's where, when you start getting and recruiting the level that they've recruited at, Ohio State, I'm speaking of. Florida, I don't know. Florida's not there yet. But Alabama is. Texas is certainly not there yet. So as the game wears on, the fatigue factor is real for the player. Don't worry about it. Coaches get paid a lot of money to stand in the heat. Don't worry about that. They'll be fine. It's all about the player.
Ryan Day's biggest challenge hosting Arkansas State, Ohio State playing Arkansas State for the very first time. What's his biggest challenge this week before we get out of here?
I have not studied Arkansas State, but it's going to be it's elite against, just an average team at best. Would be focused and not, it just used to drive you crazy when it's a sloppy game and guys aren't locked in. So I would rotate players. I would make sure that they understand that there's still competitive opportunities for players. There's nothing like competition. And I would go into these games and say, I'm going to give you a chance. This is your chance to go break in the lineup and let the players compete. But as far as, I think it's a 40-plus game point spread or something like that. But
45.
You don't want to be sloppy. You want to stay healthy. And I think right now the key word is competition at Ohio State. That means let players that haven't played much play and try. All of a sudden, a guy that's comfortable gets a little uncomfortable in the starting lineup.
Gotcha. Ladies and gentlemen, Urban Meyer, the incomparable Urban Meyer with Urban's Take. Urban, thanks for joining me, my man. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Tim. See you next week.